Mary sent her son abroad to study the art of attracting men. She hoped to use her son's beauty to seduce the king and rise to power. Eventually, Mary succeeded in being named Countess of Buckingham. Before this, she was merely a woman scorned by her husband. After her husband's death, Mary had an awakening. She quickly married a nearly 70-year-old knight in a flash marriage, just to secure funds to send her son abroad for study. This was the key to her younger son, George, captivating the king. By this time, they had become the most powerful mother and son duos in England. But Mary still felt it wasn't enough. What if George fell out of favor one day? Mary soon approached a highly influential judge in the court. Previously, she had invited the judge and his family as guests to discuss a marriage between her elder son, John, and the judge's only daughter. But Lady Harley, the judge's wife, showed no courtesy. She looked down on Mary for using her son's body to gain power, calling their family depraved and filthy. Lady Harley firmly opposed the marriage. The judge wanted to make it happen, but he was too afraid of his wife to act. Mary came here because Lady Harley was away on a trip. All they had to do now was to make a marriage contract and then make it a done deal. This way, Mary could gain a powerful ally. When the judge returned home, however, his wife was transferring their assets. Without the money, there would be no dowry for their daughter, and the marriage couldn't proceed. Lady Harley declared that she'd rather have her daughter remain single for life than marry into Mary's family. Once again, Mary pinned her hopes on George. As long as the king granted the marriage, everything would fall into place. At this point, George was in high spirits. The king asked him to accompany him on his first visit to Scotland. George was assigned to eat at the table next to the king during the banquet, while the king was openly affectionate with another boy. Jealousy consumed George. The king ignored him the entire evening. In anger, George sought comfort in the arms of an officer. Unbeknownst to him, the king witnessed everything. The king furiously berated him, calling him a disgrace. This infuriated George. "Isn't it because you were flirting with that boy first?" he retorted. The king replied that whatever he did was open and above board, unlike George's secretive debauchery. They had a fierce argument, and George was thrown out of the king's chambers. But George soon returned with a letter his mother had written to the king. The king coldly ordered him to burn it, saying he didn't care. George finally saw that the king had something on his mind. He approached with concern and asked what was troubling him. The king revealed his tragic past. At birth, his father was killed by the people of this place, and his mother was imprisoned in England for years before being beheaded. It turned out the king's mother was Mary, Queen of Scots. The king wanted no mention of Scotland. Even with his current power, he couldn't change the past. Feeling neglected by the king, George continued his liaison with the officer. They met at an abandoned castle. The officer suddenly grabbed George by the neck, attempting to strangle him. The animosity between Scotland and England had driven the officer to this act. Just as George was about to lose his life, guards arrived in time to save him. When the king learned that George had narrowly escaped death, he was deeply apologetic. He also realized that it was his alienation that made George fall into the arms of that person. The king and George finally reconciled. Mary succeeded in arranging elder son, John's marriage to the judge's daughter. Lady Harley did not attend the wedding. Mary and the judge exchanged a knowing smile. She further consolidated her position. Now it was time to choose a bride for George.